Understanding graft, flatten, and simplify is paramount for becoming proficient in Grasshopper. So let's begin by dropping a point container down on the canvas, and by right-clicking and setting multiple points and clicking around in the Rhino viewport, we can populate that container with a list of points. By hovering over the container, we can see a preview of the contents, and by connecting a panel with // to the output of the container, we can see a little bit more relevant information. So here we have our data, and each data item is associated with an index or a position in the list. And this header up here means that there is one list which is at index 0. So this is an indexing system for lists, and this is an indexing system for items within the list. If I graft this data, it'll throw each item into its own list. So now each item is at index 0 within its own list. And as you can see, this list is at index 0 within this outer list, which is also at index 0. This is the second list at index 1 within this outer list at index 0, third list at index 2, and so on. And as you can see, all of these lists are within this one outer list, which doesn't actually separate any data. And so by simplifying, I can get rid of any useless groupings that don't actually divide any data. So if I get rid of simplify and I copy and paste this whole operation and place it over here, and I inherit these values into this node and change this graft to a flatten, what flatten does is it breaks down all of the unnecessary groupings and the necessary groupings. So it's a more extreme version of simplify, and it just creates one flat list. A flat list is a list with no divisions where there's only one grouping around everything. Now that you understand graft, flatten, and simplify, let's try and understand how nodes interpret this different grouping structure. So if we drop a construct point node down on the canvas, by default, this is inheriting a list of, or this contains a list of data with only one item in it. And so each of these corresponding lists are matched up, and let's display the output, which is simply a list containing one item. As you can see, everything is about lists and lists of lists, and this will all become much more familiar with a little bit of practice. If we connect a range to one of these inputs, and a range by default just creates a list of values ranging from 0 to 1, and we place that into this x coordinate. Now what's happening, well, let's actually delete this distracting information. Now what's happening is the very first item from each of these lists is matched up and put into the very first item in the output list. And then the second item in each of these lists is matched up. But wait, there is no second item in this list. And so the very last item used is simply recycled. And that's why this 0 is carried down through each of these indices. Now, if I copy and paste this range, but right-click on the number of steps and set an integer, set it to 2. Now you can see that there's 3 values here. And if I hook this up, you can see the very first y value is here, the second y value is here, and the third y value is here. And then this third y value is recycled for every preceding item in the list until the node gets to the very end of the longest list, which is this list up here. So let's input this same list here. Now x has 10 values, y has 10 values, and the x and y coordinates are paired up correspondingly. But if instead of inputting a simple flattened list, let's take this top list and we'll graft it. And now we're inputting 10 groups here, each group containing one item. And then we're inputting 10 items here, each of them in an individual group, and then just one item in one group down here. So what this Grasshopper node is going to do is it's going to go through this first group here, and this first group here, and this first group here. And within those groups, it's going to go through the first item here, and the first item here, and the first item here, and that's how it creates this very first item. Now it goes through the second item in the first group here, and the second item in the first group here, the second item in the first group here, but it runs into an issue. There's only one item in the first group of this input, and there's only one item in the first group of this input. So it's just going to reuse these first items from these two inputs and do that until it gets to the end of the longest list, which is this list. And that's why there's 10 items within this first group of the output. And now the Grasshopper node's done with the first grouping, and it goes into the second grouping here, and it matches up the first item in the second grouping, and the first item in the second grouping here, and the first item in the second grouping here. But wait, there is no second group in this Y input and the Z input, so it just reuses the first group, and it simply pairs up that first item from that group over and over until it gets to the end of the longest list of groups. As you can see, it's the same thing as before, but just one more layer of depth. And to simply preview the structure of this output and understand where different points are and where different groups are, a nice node for visualizing this is the point list node. And if I hook this up to points and create a number slider between 0 and 0.1 with another decimal of precision, if I create a number slider between 0 and 0.1 with another decimal point of precision, then we're going to get this nice number slider. I can simply drag this up, and now you can see each color corresponds to a group, and each number corresponds to an item. So this first black group is this first group here, and so item 0 would be this item at index 0 within the black group. So I hope this tutorial helped you better understand data in order to create some beautiful designs. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in future episodes. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.